Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take your source material, strip away the noise, and bring you the core insights, the surprising facts, and the pure gold that makes you instantly well-informed.
Today, we're embarking on a deeply personal journey. We're moving away from markets and geopolitics to explore the intimate landscape of transformation. Our source is Julie Klam's memoir, You Had Me at Woof, How Dogs Taught Me the Secrets of Happiness.
That title is an immediate hook, isn't it? This deep dive is our shortcut to understanding the profound life lessons she gleaned, not from self-help gurus, but through the chaos, the commitment, and the pure, raw emotional connection of owning dogs.
Exactly. We're going to distill lessons that cover everything from self-discovery and defining commitment to coping with absolutely devastating loss and finding a unique kind of community right in the middle of a big city.
So our mission here is really to analyze the transformative power of this human-animal bond, all seen through the author's intensely witty and often pretty neurotic experiences.
And crucially, we begin when the author is 30, living in Manhattan, and by all accounts, feeling completely and utterly stalled.
Okay, let's unpack that starting context.
Yeah.
We meet her when she is just adrift. She's working this part-time clerk job at an insurance company. She's single.
And she feels like she's on permanent standby, just waiting for the main event of her life to finally kick off. She describes this intense, almost desperate need for some kind of clarity.
Right, and that desperation, it manifested in seeking external validation just everywhere.
Yeah, she wasn't just casually interested in her future. She was really invested in finding definitive answers. Names, dates, locations from psychics, from astrologers, tarot card readers.
It was a search for a concrete roadmap, basically, because she just didn't trust her own internal navigation system.
Not at all.
The sources offer these hilarious little windows into this phase. She's analyzing every single mundane sign, right?
Yeah.
She mentions going through her parents' attic, finding an old Close Encounters of the Third Kind t-shirt, and just agonizing over it.
Like, what could it possibly mean?
Yeah. Does this mean I'm going to work with Steven Spielberg? Or am I going to be contacted by aliens?
My favorite example of this, though, has to be the small square of paper she found in a new pair of pants it just read. Inspected by 34.
And her mind just leaps to these massive conclusions.
Immediately, I'll meet my husband when I'm 34, or maybe I need to lose 34 pounds. It just perfectly illustrates this profound lack of self-trust where every random number is loaded with some kind of prophetic meaning.
It's that classic feeling of being paralyzed by choice. If anyone would just tell you the answer, then you can finally stop waiting and start acting.
And she says that even her mother, who was a healer, would emphasize that her life was hers to choose. But that message to her just felt overwhelming.
She and her friend Barbara just wanted a printout. Do A, B, and C in this order.
And the definitive answer, the one that finally broke through all the noise of psychics and random numbers, it arrived where our true deep-seated desires often emerge.
In a dream. This is the soulmate dream.
And it was unbelievably specific. A Boston Terrier, just trotting effortlessly through high grass and wild daisies.
The dog had these big round eyes like the letter O.
And the name that flashed in her mind, spelling out with those eyes, was Otto.
It wasn't a human soulmate.
No, it was canine. And the power of that dream was immediate. She instantly felt this future, unexplainable love. It was the catalyst that shifted her energy from just passively waiting to, actively searching.
This was the sign she'd been looking for. But it pointed her inward, toward a relationship of deep commitment, rather than outward toward a job or a man.
So the quest for Otto begins. And that leads us straight into lesson 1, finding the right one and the gift of unconditional love.
The search for Otto began with some pretty solid due diligence. She was confirming the Boston Terrier breed profile.
Right. She checked her books and found that they were perfect for apartment living, 5 out of 5 stars, and also hypoallergenic, which is a huge deal in New York City.
And the history of the breed is fascinating. It really speaks to their resilience. They were originally developed from crossbreeding an English Bulldog and an English Terrier, and then later crossed back with a Bulldog.
They got that nickname, the American Gentleman, because of their neat, tuxedo-like markings. And the author found them really appealing because they had this old-fashioned, classic New York vibe.
She called them Harold Lloyd as a dog.
Exactly. They were common in her grandparents' era. She'd felt a pull toward them ever since she saw a picture of one in Chris Elliott's foyer. But the dream, that was the moment of action.
So she calls a breeder, one recommended by a coworker, but learns the breeder is shifting focus to French Bulldogs, the Boston Terrier's cousin.
But that call was the key. It introduced her to the world of Boston Terrier rescue.
And here we get that beautiful initial misunderstanding. She thought rescue meant she'd be, like, rappelling down ravines or pulling dogs off ice floes.
Very dramatic image of peril.
Totally. The reality of rescue taking in surrendered or abandoned pets was much more grounded, but, just as profound in its own way.
And that's how she was introduced to Buddy, a 1.5-year-old male found wandering the streets in the middle of winter.
He was in rough shape, suffering from summer fleas and mange, practically skin and bones. The breeder, describing him, noted his droopy, non-show quality ears.
But then she just said all he really needs is a little love.
That detail about the droopy ears, the feature that disqualified him from being a show dog, it immediately humanizes him. It highlights that the focus of rescue isn't about perfection, it's about life.
And Buddy had this one key immediate virtue despite his rough start.
He had never, not once, had an accident inside the foster home.
That was the moment of connection. The author instantly claimed him, overruling the name Buddy with her prophetic name, Otto. The commitment was intense and immediate.
I love the detail that when another interested party called back just minutes later, the breeder simply said, "Too late, he's going home."
She was all in, and she fully entered this mother-to-be neurotic nesting phase. She went nuts shopping, preparing for his arrival.
And the specifics are great. A red and black check bed from Orvis.
She found varsity football letters and hand-sewed OTTO onto the bed.
She bought 4 different books titled Boston Terrier, Cases of Pig Ears and Marrow Bones. This wasn't just buying supplies. This was manifesting commitment through retail therapy.
And that immediate commitment dictated the whole initial dynamic. She took a full week off work just for his adjustment period, driven by her chronic neurosis about leaving him alone.
She describes this whole elaborate performance of leaving the apartment, standing in the hallway for an hour, and then returning from her fake shopping trip, just to make sure he was okay.
But Otto, the street dog, he immediately demonstrated his own kind of genius and adaptability.
He just sat perfectly in his new red and black bed, acting like he'd been a permanent fixture in that apartment forever. He was the stable one in the relationship.
He was stable, but he was certainly unique. We learned so much about his little personality.
Right. He didn't lick. He snoofled, which she describes as blowing air and wetness through his nose.
Like a cheerful blowhole.
Exactly. And he was demanding of attention. If you stopped petting him, the paw taps would start gently, but they'd escalate into what she calls hits until you complied.
And a true American gentleman with specific demanding tastes. He loved salmon in all forms. Grilled, raw, smoked, croqueted.
He was an amazing soccer player, too. Could juggle a ball on his nose.
He also slept exclusively under the covers, and he absolutely refused to wear hooded raincoats or boots.
The quirks continued right down to the physical details. He'd yell when people swam, and he treated his bath time like it was a violent violation.
And maybe most endearingly, and something I think a lot of dog owners can relate to, he constantly smelled like Fritos.
A phenomenon the veterinary ophthalmologist confirmed while examining his exceptionally bulgy eyes.
This level of neurotic but unconditional commitment forced a radical restructuring of her life. And this is where the lesson about compromise really lands.
Totally.
Yeah.
She stopped ordering spicy foods because he couldn't eat them, and she always ordered enough for 2. Her daily schedule shifted entirely. She started her workouts at 4:45 a.m. just to be back before Otto woke up at 6:30.
And what's fascinating here is the complete lack of resentment. For years, she had worried she was too selfish for marriage, convinced she couldn't compromise or sacrifice her own needs.
Yet, within 6 months of having Otto, she realized that if you genuinely love someone, you're more than willing to change your life without feeling like you're losing your freedom.
That's a huge psychological hurdle to clear. The relationship with Otto became the proving ground for human relationships. It showed her she could gain something: contentment, purpose, unconditional love, rather than just lose her independence.
And this commitment immediately acted as a miraculous social lubricant in the city. She developed dog vision, suddenly spotting dogs 2 blocks away that she would have previously missed entirely.
Otto became her ambassador. He facilitated interactions with every neighbor she'd previously ignored.
And the sources list the sheer variety of people she met, from her doorman to actual celebrities.
She describes Kevin Bacon and Kyra Sedgwick being wowed by Otto's ability to kick dirt 30 feet.
Diane Weist, Chris Cuomo, Billy Baldwin, and Shanna Phillips, all because Otto offered this safe, friendly, conversational opening.
It immediately solved the problem of loneliness in a big city. Her therapist even observed that she had much greater success attracting men once she was regularly walking Otto.
So that fear of becoming the isolated dog person was immediately dismissed by the reality. This relationship was healing her neuroses, forcing her to grow up, and actually preparing her for a human partner, which she eventually found in her husband, Paul.
It proved that the depth of love required for a dog demands the same selflessness required for marriage and family. And in a lot of ways, the unconditional nature of canine love made the practice a whole lot easier.
The stability and contentment Otto brought ironically spurred the author back into seeking direction, which leads us to Lesson 2, the animal communication detour, or finding clarity through elimination.
Right. Now that her personal life was stabilizing, she refocused on her career. Writing a children's book, Otto in the City, wasn't financially viable yet, so she explored other dog-inclusive careers, vet tech, groomer, things like that.
And that's when she received the Omega Institute catalog, and the idea of becoming an animal communicator just took hold.
This was immediately inspired by a prior experience. A $150 45-minute phone session she'd had with an animal communicator. She saw the potential to become Dr. Dolittle or nothing, and charge those impressive rates while staying close to Otto.
But this immediately raises a critical question for you, the listener. Why was she still seeking these definitive external answers, like a new career path, when the true answer, Otto, had come from her own instinctual dream?
It just shows how persistent that need for external validation was, even after she'd found some stability.
So she signs up for the workshop at the Omega Institute, which she describes as Grateful Dead sleepaway camp.
A setting that immediately contrasts with her neurotic Manhattan reality. We're talking rainbow batik, white people dreadlocks, and macrobiotic food.
The humor really peaks during the communication exercises. The instructor, Penelope, had the class try to communicate with crickets at dusk.
And you just hear about this intense projection happening. Some students heard the crickets discussing a storm coming from the northeast or assigning tasks like who brings dessert.
Meanwhile, the author is just struggling. She only heard them saying chirp, chirp, or, with her typical sarcastic humor, asking about the high price of the workshop, which was $500.
A complete disconnect.
Totally. So she tried to apply the techniques to a boxer, closing her eyes, trying to clear her mind. When nothing came, she projected her own thoughts, imagining the boxer saying he didn't like his docked ears and tail.
And when she shared this, Penelope, the instructor, was quick to affirm that she had the gift.
But the author instinctively knew it was just luck or, an educated guess. It just fueled her deep-seated skepticism.
And this whole detour really proved the difference between some manufactured psychic ability and true established instinct. She realized she already had communication with Otto.
Right, she knew when he needed his anal glands expressed, which was signaled by a very specific circular dragging dance where he would look back at her like a ballerina spotting during a pirouette.
That is communication. It's based on relationship and shared history.
The ultimate painful confirmation that the psychic career path was not for her was physical. When she introduced an assistant from the workshop to Otto to test her skills.
Otto immediately bit the assistant.
And the author had to pay the medical bills. That closed the door definitively.
But the deeper lesson here is the value of clarity through elimination. She needed to know what didn't fit. She tried doggy daycare for Otto on her long therapy days, and he flatly refused 2 different places.
At a place called Canine Country, this massive facility, he refused to use the bathroom on the floor for 11 hours. He held his urine the entire time.
And at the Tonier Yuppie Puppy, he employed the suction cup feature that's common to small dogs, making himself utterly immobile at the entrance, just fusing himself to the ground.
She tried reasoning with him, explaining she'd be gone for 11 hours, but he just stared back with these tight, determined lips and pranced toward home.
He had communicated his preference unequivocally. He wanted to stay alone or go to Aunt Maddie's doggy heaven, which cost the same, but was a cab ride away.
So the lesson wasn't about finding the perfect job. It was about finding out what wasn't comfortable. The daycare, the animal communication, the other careers.
By finding out what didn't fit, she realized that her true joy and comfort came from telling the stories and simply being with her dog. It confirmed her path as a writer who could work from home.
That's the true meaning of finding the parachute color that flatters you. It's the one you land safely in after jumping on the wrong plane.
The joy and stability Otto provided was absolute, but the hardest reality of commitment is facing its inevitable end. And for the author, that end came with devastating suddenness, forcing her into lesson 3, the hard realities of commitment, starting with loss.
Otto's unexpected death while the author was 4 months pregnant caused immense, gut-wrenching grief. She was despondent, consumed by the loss, and worried the sheer intensity of her sadness would somehow hurt her unborn child.
The grief immediately turned into a search for continuity. She searched for signs of Otto's reincarnation, calculating the birth dates of new Boston Terrier puppies, hoping his soul might have slipped into a puppy named Henry.
It was a desperate attempt to maintain that bond.
But despite the profound mourning and ignoring the screaming suggestions from her family not to get a puppy right before the baby arrived, she and her husband Paul adopted Beatrice, a Frenchie cousin.
She felt a relief that Beatrice was a fresh spirit, unencumbered by depth, which was maybe a necessary shield against the grief left by Otto's profound presence. Beatrice didn't have Otto's breadth of requirements.
The baby and puppy combo was, as you'd expect, pure chaos. She describes the initial juggling act, managing her daughter Violet in the stroller, while handling Beatrice's Luche as being like landing a jet on an aircraft carrier in the middle of the ocean at midnight.
It required total, uncoordinated focus.
And the interspecies incidents were plentiful. One night, a blood-curdling scream from Violet turned out not to be the baby.
It was Beatrice, who had thrown up her dinner all over the sheets in their bed.
Then came the truly chaotic moment. Beatrice's first menstruation, a frantically unsuccessful attempt to secure a diaper on the puppy.
She recounts slipping a tiny newborn swaddling diaper on, only for it to fall off repeatedly.
Yeah.
She grew more insane, resorting to using an entire roll of packing tape to secure the diaper.
Only for Beatrice to leap onto the bed, leaving the tapey diaper on the floor behind her.
This specific domestic chaos led to the ultimate mic drop moment when her gynecologist asked about birth control. Her response, "My daughter and our dog sleep in our bed."
The gynecologist, having heard enough, moved on instantly. The chaos itself had become its own form of contraception.
And after realizing the family wasn't ready for a second human child, the author's longing shifted to a desire for another dog, specifically one with Otto's unique features, which led her naturally into lesson 4, venturing into rescue.
Her motivation was clear. She wanted to help dogs like Champ, a Boston Terrier rescue with a broken jaw whose tongue perpetually hung out. She applied to the Northeast Boston Terrier Rescue, or NARBTR, embracing the philosophy that service is the rent we pay to be living.
But given her constraints, a young child and no car, she was limited initially to doing home checks and pulling dogs from shelters in the 5 boroughs.
And for the listener, pulling means the critical act of removing a dog from the city pound before they face euthanasia. And she was so committed she marked yes to fostering on the application, even before discussing it with Paul.
Her first foster experience was Hank, an 8-month-old Boston puppy. His owner, Charlotte, claimed he was surrendered due to the high cost of daycare.
Which immediately introduces the critical aspect of rescue work, managing unreliable narrators.
The intake coordinator, Cheryl, provided the immediate, harsh reality. When owners are surrendering, many times they will say anything. The owners lie.
And the reality of Hank was that he was unneutered and pretty much housebroken, translated to, he pisses and craps wherever the hell he feels like.
Hank was pure adrenaline. He was Hank, the flying, biting clown dog, flying from chair to couch to the dining room table. While the author could handle the chewing of shoes and dolls, the line was crossed when Hank's aggression culminated in sinking his teeth into Violet's arm.
That was the point of no return. They realized they were not the right foster environment. They sent Hank upstate to a trainer, feeling that complex guilt of failure mixed with the certainty of making the right choice for their child.
It wasn't Hank's fault he hadn't been properly socialized, but the family could not be sacrificed.
And this experience deepened her understanding of the puzzling psychology of surrender. She relates the anecdote of the Bichon puppy named Sophie, surrendered to her therapist with this enormous haul of ridiculously expensive gear.
4 plush beds, 12 bowls, over 30 toys, cases of wipes, and a wardrobe that included flannel pajamas and a pink t-shirt that read, "Does this shirt make me look fat?"
That anecdote is such a powerful commentary on consumerism and superficial commitment. The shock is the sheer high-dollar cost and effort invested in the things, hundreds of dollars, only to dump the dog at a shelter without trying to rehome.
Why invest so much in the accoutrements and so little in the actual relationship?
She observed that many people put more research into purchasing a car than into adopting a sentient, dependent life form. And this is where her role as a home check volunteer became so vital and complex.
The home check process puts her in the unique position of judge. She's riding the subway to fifth-floor walk-ups, sizing up potential adopters. She felt the heavy responsibility to place these dogs in homes where she would be comfortable placing her own dogs.
It's an ethically difficult position. She contrasts it with the lack of scrutiny for pregnant parents. She also highlights the frequent human tendency to seek dogs who resemble beloved lost pets, a practice veteran volunteers caution against, fearing the inevitable disappointment when the new dog fails to be the old one.
Yet, she knew from her own experience with Beatrice that a unique bond could still form.
The emotional toll of the rescue work, dealing with Hank and the psychology of surrender, pushes us into Lesson 4 again, uncovering truth, through the dramatic case of Chip Shaggy.
This was an emergency rescue, an urgent call to pull a found Boston Terrier named Mr. Man from a woman named Coco in the West Village.
And Coco was wearing a slip and stiletto heels, appeared on drugs, and immediately threatened to dump the dog in the city pound.
The initial transport was a complete nightmare, underscoring the raw reality of rescue. The dog immediately had explosive diarrhea 40 times over a single city block.
The author, covered in sweat and blood from cutting her hand on his wiry rope leash, had to seek refuge in a bar called Kettle of Fish.
Luckily, the environment of the cool, dark bar calmed the dog down. Renaming him Chip, they located a microchip which traced back to a large pet chain in New Jersey. The author, skeptical of Coco's abuse claim because the dog was sweet and non-hand-shy, began the relentless calling process to track down the owners.
When she finally reached the owner's wife, the conversation became just bizarre.
The wife, when told her dog was safe in Manhattan, asked if he could simply be mailed to New Jersey.
The author, just shocked by the casual dismissal of a missing pet, almost hung up.
The full truth was eventually revealed by the husband, who finally retrieved the dog, whose real name was Shaggy. The couple had been in Portugal for a month, and Shaggy had been missing for 3 months.
The happy ending was returning Shaggy to the children who loved him, but the ordeal reinforced the need to trust instinct and question every single detail provided by unreliable narrators like Coco.
After Hank and Shaggy, the emotional drain of fostering became unsustainable for the family. This is what led her into Lesson 5, taking a break and becoming an amateur therapist, the role of transport coordinator.
Paul and Violet found the revolving door of fosters too confusing and upsetting. So the author switched to managing transports, a role that was purely administrative but deeply complex. She famously described it as a logistical challenge. A relay race over several states with a freaked-out dog instead of an egg and a spoon.
This administrative stress peaked during the Daisy crisis. A transport for a senior dog, who was on her 3rd home after a life of stability, was nearly canceled due to a volunteer's family emergency.
Trying to find a last-minute replacement driver, the author was viciously berated in a scathing email by a volunteer named Dick from poodle911@dick.com, claiming she was incompetent.
The exhaustion of dealing with the logistics and the emotional strain of the volunteer politics culminated in an emotional breakdown. She finally found an angel driver at 1 a.m. and wept from relief for Daisy.
That exhaustion and relief highlighted the immense unseen value of the service she was providing, proving that meaningful work doesn't always involve hands-on care.
But our mind still needed occupying, which naturally leads us to Lesson 6, How to Fall in Love. Again, and the story of Moses.
While on her administrative break, Jane, the intake coordinator, had 2 dogs coming in. One was easy. The other, named Rascal, was terrified and spent his life hiding under a couch.
And Paul was emphatically against keeping him. He only agreed to a foster period, setting a strict boundary. At the first sign of aggression, like with Hank, the foster was over.
Rascal was, initially, exactly as advertised. He shook like Scooby-Doo in a haunted house and seemed irreparably damaged by his past. The author felt immense pity, struggling to break through his profound fear.
She decided the name Rascal was utterly unsuited to his serious, earnest nature, so she renamed him Moses.
And she genuinely attributes a personality change to the new name. He became less nervous, more serious, and earnest. He visibly blossomed, developing a skip in his step and a little moxie.
Moses became her fur kid. He sat on her lap while she worked, putting his big head right on the keyboard. She admitted he was the first dog who truly came close to the profound connection she'd had with Otto, defining dog as its own critical category of love.
But the shift created friction in the household. Violet, now 4, started viewing Moses as a sibling rival. She began pointing at days on the calendar and asking if Moses could go live elsewhere. The jealousy was palpable and complex.
Meanwhile, The author was preparing for her first book tour, 8 cities in 11 days, and was just racked with anxiety about leaving Violet and Moses. This stress created a tragic vulnerability.
Moses slipped out of his harness while being walked by the dog walker.
The author raced out, chasing him in the twilight. She recounts the scene with devastating clarity. She saw him across Broadway, and he saw her. He ran toward her, and in that split second of recognition and pure joy, he was hit head-on by an oncoming SUV.
The moment of picking him up, still feeling his heartbeat, consumed her. It's a gut-wrenching moment of profound guilt and trauma, amplified by the stress of her imminent departure.
She had to grant the vet permission to let him go, then returned home to deal with Violet's complex grief, fueled by her recent wish for Moses to disappear.
They navigated Violet's sorrow by leaning on the idea of doggy heaven in the Rainbow Bridge poem. But for the author, the vision of the accident played on a loop in her brain for months. She speaks of the relief she felt only when the specific, marked spot on Broadway was finally paved over.
The immense comfort she found in the rescue community speaks to the power of shared experience. Every member understood the depth of the anguish of losing a dog, especially in a traumatic way.
They understood that this loss is not merely losing a pet, it is losing a dependent, unconditional love that you are wholly responsible for.
The tragedy of Moses forced her to confront the core risk-reward calculation of the human-animal bond. Some people, after such a loss, vow never to love a dog again to avoid that pain. But the author's path was clearly defined now. The love, despite the cost, was essential.
We transition now into the final lessons, starting with a moment of necessary chaos, Lesson 8. The layover fiasco, which tested the author's resolve.
4 months after Moses' death, despite the emotional ban on fosters, the author agreed to a temporary commitment, a 2-day layover for 2 puppy mixes, Sarah and Lizzie.
This was a classic test of the nothing involving rescue dogs is ever simple maxim.
And it was an immediate confirmation of chaos. In 1 hour, 1 puppy ate Paul's laptop power cord and the author's iPod.
And Lizzie, in what the author felt was a deliberate insulting act, peed on the bed twice in 5 minutes while she was preparing for a meeting.
Paul called repeatedly from work, not just for updates, but to share in the misery, ensuring the author was as miserable as he was. They ultimately survived the layover, but it reinforced her desire for a more manageable, less destructive foster experience.
This internal debate, simultaneously agonizing over whether to have a second human child and avoiding chaotic puppies, propelled her toward Lesson 9, fostering a senior and the ultimate surprise.
She decided to focus on senior dogs, recognizing they are consistently the last to be adopted. Jane, the coordinator, called about Dahlia.
Dahlia, a 10-year-old female Boston mix, was dumped in the Brooklyn CACC because her family claimed financial trouble. The shelter reported she was terrified and wouldn't even hold her head up.
The author raced home early from D.C. to pull her out of the pound.
Dahlia's first impression was profoundly sad. The author notes she looked closer to 12, with a gray muzzle, cataracts, age warts, bald spots, fatty masses, and rotten teeth. She wondered if Dahlia was a Boston Chihuahua mix.
She even compared her defeated expression to the famous Great Depression photograph, Migrant Mother.
The initial commitment was medical. The attempts to diagnose her ailment led to high-cost blood tests, almost $400 just for the tests.
The vet suspected Cushing's disease, a malfunctioning pituitary gland leading to excess cortisol. It was treatable, but required expensive long-term medication, and it explained her bald spots and fatty growths.
The author felt obligated and sorry for Dahlia, but admitted she wasn't in love yet.
However, Violet was fiercely attached. She set up tea parties, sang songs, and called Dahlia the belle of the ball. Violet fiercely advocated against her adoption, declaring Dahlia was her sister.
But Dahlia started exhibiting odd behavior that seemed to confirm her decline. She started eating bathroom garbage, flipping her bed over and around, dragging it into different places, and furiously barking at nothing.
The author figured the Grim Reaper was by her bed, or that Cushing's was advancing rapidly.
And then came the truth, which turned out to be the ultimate life-altering surprise, arriving at 4 a.m.
The author woke up, sensed Dahlia had passed, but found her alive. An hour later, while cleaning up messy diarrhea, she heard a squeak and found 2 black and white puppies nursing in the bed.
Dahlia had been pregnant the entire time.
The moment of realization must have been electric. All of Dahlia's symptoms, the bloating, the nesting, the aggression, even the vet's Cushing's guess, were related to gestation and the approaching birth.
It was nothing short of miraculous, given Dahlia's age, which the author compared to a 72-year-old woman giving birth.
This immediately triggered Lesson 10, how to find happiness in chaos. Dahlia instantly transformed from annoying grandmother to Eleanor Roosevelt in the author's eyes. She was a professional mother, giving birth and cleaning everything up herself, clearly wanting to do it alone.
So the author mobilized immediately, building a whelping box from a UPS moving box, lining it with the New York Times and a crib sheet canopy.
Cheryl visited, confirming the sexes, a walnut for the girl, a tiny peepee for the boy, but also noting their long noses and huge ears, declaring, "They will never, ever grow into those ears."
A new panic set in when Cheryl noted the lack of milk. This forced the author into round-the-clock supplementation, 50 milliliters of formula every 2 hours, day and night.
Echoing the profound exhaustion she had experienced caring for her human newborn. She was back in the dim light, night nursing, but now determined to save the puppies for Dahlia's sake.
The empathy deepened profoundly. She related to Dahlia needing a break, imagining the senior dog sitting alone with an imaginary General Foods International coffee and a Talgon bath.
Her determination solidified. Dahlia was home and would never leave. Her diet was immediately boosted with cheeseburgers, chicken, cottage cheese, and yogurt.
The decision to keep the puppies was chaotic, but ultimately cemented the family. Violet named them Wisteria and Fiorello. Paul initially wanted the male, Fiorello, due to being outnumbered by females in the house.
The ultimate decision was made via a philosophical text exchange with Paul, where the author cited his ultimate wisdom. We do what we feel is right, but we don't always do what's best for us.
They kept both, resulting in a chaotic but immense joy of having 4 dogs total. The puppies, though, grew up with their mother's presence. Dahlia, tragically, passed away the day before her 1-year anniversary with the family, likely due to the extreme physical toll of the birth.
Violet, heartbroken but more mature now, found comfort when the author suggested that Paul and she could be the puppy's mommy and daddy too, imagining Dahlia in heaven, healthy and with all her teeth again. It was a chaotic, beautiful end that validated the risk of love.
In the final synthesis, we return to the practical application of this hard-won wisdom in Lesson 11. How to find the right fit, which begins with the agonizing ethical dilemmas of rescue.
Right. The author looks back at the immense difficulty of making placement decisions, recalling the earlier case of Sherlock, the obese, coughing Boston Terrier pulled from the CACC. He was quickly adopted by a man who, on paper, seemed ideal.
But controversy immediately erupted. The adopter was discovered to be on a boxer rescue do not adopt list, having potentially lied about how a previous boxer died, claiming cancer. But witnesses suggested he was hit by a car after being let out in an unfenced yard.
This is the moment where the critical thinking in rescue is really tested. The group faced the agonizing dilemma. Do we trust the man's current story, or do we steal Sherlock back?
This is the gray area of judgment. You're trying to save a dog, but you're also trying to assess human morality.
Mary Lou, a tough board member, spoke to the adopter. He explained the boxer had a brain tumor and was hit by a car. Ultimately, Mary Lou and Joy assessed the home as good wacky,
meaning unconventional, perhaps messy, but fundamentally committed. They decided to allow for the gray area and not reclaim Sherlock.
And this speaks volumes about the difficulty of defining a good home. The author observes that a single working person in a small space, like she was when she got Otto, might be a far better home than a perfect family if they commit fully and accept the chaos.
The financial ability and square footage are often less important than the depth of devotion.
She then addresses the common query from the non-dog person, Andrea, who wants the mythical ideal dog. Not needy, not high maintenance, not too small, not too big, doesn't bark, doesn't shed, doesn't smell.
The author noted that Andrea's apartment whispers, "Dogs do not live here."
She advises, starting by noticing which dogs appeal to you, confirming Boston Terriers don't shed. But the crucial point is that individuality trumps breed stereotypes.
Right. While breeds have general traits, chows are mean, beagles howl. Your unique experience with the individual dog is key. She admits her own strong prejudices, disliking Chesapeake Bay Retrievers and Pulis.
This circles back to the core wisdom gleaned through all her canine relationships. You don't end up getting the dog that you want. You get the dog that you need.
Each dog served a specific, necessary function in her self-discovery. Otto taught her reciprocal nurturing and showed her she wasn't too selfish for commitment.
Moses introduced the profound trauma and grief that comes with deep love.
Dahlia proved that life continues to surprise and demand devotion, even in old age. And the unexpected puppies created the final, immense, chaotic joy.
This brings us to the ultimate, almost confrontational question posed by a cranky man on Riverside Drive, motioning to her chaotic pack of dogs. What is the point?
She offered the scientific answer first, citing National Institutes of Health findings. Dog ownership boosts survival rates for coronary care patients, lowers blood pressure, and releases pleasure hormones like oxytocin. The bond is medically beneficial.
But the more immediate, visceral answer came from her husband, Paul, who interviewed the dogs in his William F. Buckley accent. The dogs answered with excited wiggling, yipping, and grabbing toys, with Fiorillo getting so excited he peed a little. The point for them was obvious.
This deep dive confirms that happiness is messy, chaotic, often involves unexpected vomiting and a Frito smell. But that unconditional bond is the engine for personal growth and purpose found through service. She learned she was entrusted with an awesome guardianship, a unique power dynamic of loving something totally dependent on you.
And the author, after surviving the tragedy of Moses and the subsequent losses, makes a powerful final statement. She says she prefers any amount of time with a dog I love and suffer the mourning than not have the time at all. The human-animal bond carries a built-in emotional catastrophe, yet we willingly, repeatedly enter into it.
And that is the perfect point to leave you, the listener, to contemplate. The risk-reward calculation is the secret to human vulnerability. How deep a bond are you willing to forge, and how great a risk of pain are you willing to take, knowing that the inevitable goodbye is always waiting? That acceptance of pain for the sake of love is the secret to happiness, often taught best by a flat-faced dog.